In this video, we will look at different ways to loop over a list in Java and also the different types of loops that are available in Java to iterate through a collection or an array. Before we move further, do not forget to hit that subscribe button and get future updates. Create a list of strings using its constructor with arrays.asList method. This is a very simple method to create a list pre-populated with some elements, else you will have to add them one by one. Store the total list elements in a variable using its size method. Add a variable that will point to each list element in loop one by one. Initialize it to 0 since this is the position of first list element. First way is using a while loop. While loop begins with while keyword followed by a condition that must evaluate to either true or false. Loop statements keep on executing till the condition remains true. To iterate over a list, we will execute the loop till this counter remains lesser than the size of list. So, while counter less than size, get the current list element using index with get method and print it. Increase the counter to point to the next list element. Run the program. It prints all the list elements. Next way is using a do while loop, which is similar to while loop, but it starts with do keyword and the condition is placed inside while at the end. Unlike while, this loop ends with a semicolon. Condition will remain the same. Run this. Works. A do while loop first executes the statements written inside do block, then evaluates the condition and executes again if the condition returned true. So, a do while loop will execute at least once, even if this condition is false initially. So, check the counter to be lesser than 0, which is false at first place. Run it. Look, it printed the first element, which means that these statements were executed once. Next is using the most commonly used for loop with index. Its syntax is for keyword followed by parenthesis. The parenthesis contains 3 sections separated by a semicolon. First section is the initialization, where we initialize the loop counter. Second is the condition. The loop will execute till the condition remains true. Third is the increment or decrement section, where you increase or decrease the loop counter value in steps. Generally, it is plus plus or minus minus, which means that we change the loop counter by 1. All these 3 sections are optional, but you have to make sure that they are provided to the loop some way or the other, such that you can initialize the loop counter prior to the loop, in which case you can remove initialization section, or increase the counter inside the loop, and so you can remove the third section. Even if you omit any section, the semicolons must be in place. Example, here the loop counter is initialized before the loop and so the initialization statement is omitted here. Go back to code example, write a for loop. This will be the initialization statement. Condition will be loop counter is less than size, since we have to iterate complete list. And increment statement will be plus plus, since we have to access every list element one by one. Print list element as before. Run this. Works. Next is enhanced for loop introduced in Java 5. Enhanced for loop has a very simple syntax as compared to traditional for loop, without any indexes, loop counters, condition, and increment decrement statements. It simply defines a variable of the same data type as the collection on which it is looping, followed by colon and then the collection. So, if we are iterating over a list or array of string values, then this variable will be a string. In every iteration, this variable is automatically populated with the next element of this collection. Back to code. Remove all this. For a string variable, since our list is of string elements, colon the list. Print this variable. In every iteration, this variable will contain a list item. We don't want this now. Run. Works. See how concise it gets. Next is the forEach method introduced in Java 8. Simply call forEach on list. forEach, as you can see, requires a consumer argument. Consumer is a function interface also added in Java 8, which has only one abstract method that accepts one argument and returns nothing. Since consumer is a function interface, we can pass a lambda expression here. Lambda expression will be, this lambda expression accepts one argument and returns no value, thereby representing consumer interface. forEach will be called on each list element once, thereby populating this variable with a list element every time. forEach is a default interface method added in iterable interface, which is implemented by list. So, Any collection that implements iterable can use forEach. Run this. This also works. This is also a very concise method. If you are not familiar with lambda expression, then do watch the video suggested at the top right corner. Another method of iterating over a list is using an iterator. To get an iterator over a list, use its iterator method. Iterator is generic and its type will be the same as the type of list element. So, in this case, it will be a string. To iterate using an iterator, use while loop and the loop condition will be specified using iterator's hasNext method, which returns true if there are more elements left. To get a list element, use iterator's next method. Run this. Works. So, in this video, we looked at 6 different ways to iterate over a list and also the type of loops in Java. Hope you found this useful and I'll see you in the next one.